I picked up the phone with shaking hands. The realtor's voice on the other end was steady, almost cheerful, but her words hit me like a hammer to the chest. "Mrs. Patterson, I have to inform you that there's someone claiming ownership of the apartment. She says it belonged to her brother. She has documentation." My stomach dropped. I was standing in the kitchen of the two-bedroom apartment in downtown Portland that I just closed on 48 hours ago. The one I'd spent 3 years saving for. The one that was supposed to be mine. "What do you mean, belong to her brother?" I managed to ask, gripping the countertop. "I have a deed. I have the title transfer. I have the inspection report." "I understand, but she's insisting." I hung up. I actually hung up on the realtor. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. Let me back up. Let me tell you who I was before that phone call came in. My name is Ashley Patterson, and for the past 5 years, I'd been living the kind of life that made people say I had it all figured out. I'm 34 years old, I work in marketing at a mid-sized tech company, and I make decent money, around $85,000 a year. Nothing glamorous, but stable, reliable. The kind of income that lets you plan for things. I'd been married once, briefly, to a guy named Derek when I was 26. That ended badly. He turned out to be more interested in his gym buddies than in actually showing up for our marriage. But I didn't let it scar me. I learned from it. I got smarter. I got more careful about who I let into my life. Since the divorce, I'd focused on what I could control. My career, my health, my finances. I went to the gym 4 times a week. I meal prepped on Sundays. I paid my credit card bills on time and watched my credit score climb from a devastating 580 right after the divorce to a solid 758 by last year. I was proud of that. The apartment was the culmination of 3 years of disciplined saving. Every paycheck, I'd transferred money into a separate high-yield savings account. No vacations, no new car, no impulse purchases, just the grinding, unglamorous work of building something. My mom thought I was crazy. "You're going to work yourself to death, honey," she'd say whenever I visited. "You need to enjoy your life. You're not getting any younger." But she didn't understand. This wasn't about deprivation. It was about independence. It was about knowing that no matter what happened, no layoffs, no health crisis, no bad relationship, I had something that was mine, completely and totally mine. The apartment itself was beautiful, a corner unit on the 3rd floor of a converted brick warehouse in the Pearl District. Original hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, high ceilings with these gorgeous metal beams. The windows looked out over the Willamette River, and you could see Mount Hood on clear days. It was the kind of place I'd walked past 100 times and thought, someday. The closing happened on a Tuesday in early November. I remember sitting in the title company's office, signing my name over and over on documents I'd already reviewed a dozen times. The notary was a woman named Linda, probably in her 60s, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She explained each document to me as I signed: the promissory note, the deed of trust, the final deed transfer. "This one makes it official," she'd said, sliding the final document across the table. "This is the one that makes it yours." I'd felt my eyes get a little wet. I actually signed it and then just sat there looking at my own signature, thinking about the 3 years of budgeting spreadsheets and denied happy hours, and watching my friends take trips to Hawaii while I calculated compound interest. "Congratulations," Linda had said, and she meant it, I could tell. I got the keys that afternoon. I went straight to the apartment and just stood in the middle of the living room for probably 20 minutes, not doing anything. Just standing there, letting it sink in. I texted my best friend Jennifer a picture of the view from my living room window. She responded with a string of emojis and, "Yes, girl! Celebration dinner this weekend?" We did. Jennifer took me to this nice Italian place in Northwest Portland, and she brought along our other close friend Marcus, who worked in tech like me. We drank too much wine and laughed too loud, and I felt genuinely happy for the first time in years. Not the grim satisfaction of hitting a financial target, but actual, uncomplicated happiness. To Ashley, Jennifer said, raising her glass, who is officially a homeowner and therefore officially cooler than both of us. To Ashley, Marcus echoed, who will definitely let us crash here whenever we want. I laughed. Obviously. First Thanksgiving dinner is on me. I'm going to cook. You don't cook, Jennifer said. I'm going to learn, I replied. That was exactly 1 week before the phone call. I'd spent that week doing the things new homeowners do. I'd walked around measuring walls and thinking about paint colors. I'd Googled what to do immediately after buying an apartment and started a checklist. I'd texted my mom a video tour, and she'd cried and told me she was proud of me, which made me cry. I'd also been in touch with the realtor, Patricia, about a few minor things. The water heater was older, and she was arranging for an inspection. The HOA fees were being transferred into my name. All the normal stuff. Patricia had seemed professional and straightforward. She was in her late 50s, wore sensible blazers, and had sold me the apartment after showing me maybe 15 others over the course of 2 months. She knew my situation, single, first-time buyer, putting down 20%, and she'd been patient and helpful throughout the process. Until that phone call. When I finally called her back, my hands had stopped shaking, but my mouth was dry. Patricia, what exactly is going on? I asked, trying to sound calm and businesslike. Who is this woman claiming ownership? There was a pause. Patricia sounded uncomfortable. Her name is Karen Mitchell. She says the apartment was owned by her brother, David Mitchell, and that there was never supposed to be a sale. She's saying the property was listed without authorization. That's insane, I said. I have a title transfer, a deed. Are you telling me these documents are fraudulent? I'm not saying that, Patricia said carefully. But she's saying it. She's threatening legal action. She's saying the sale is void. My chest tightened. Is she right? Can she do that? Can she void the sale? I don't know, Patricia admitted. That's between you and your lawyer now, Ashley. I've already spoken to the title company. They're concerned. You should probably contact an attorney. After I hung up, I sat down on the hardwood floor of my apartment. My apartment, or at least the place I'd thought was my apartment, and I felt something inside me crack. I pulled out my laptop and did what any panicked person does. I Googled, can property sale be voided after closing? Fraudulent real estate transaction. What happens if previous owner claims ownership after closing? The answers weren't reassuring. There were scenarios, apparently. Scenarios where titles weren't clean. Scenarios where previous owners had legitimate claims. Scenarios that ended with buyers losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. I called my mom. I don't usually do that. I pride myself on handling my own problems. But I needed to hear a familiar voice. Mom, I think something bad is happening, I said. What do you mean? What's wrong? Her voice shifted immediately from casual to alert. I explained what Patricia had told me. As I talked, I could hear my own voice getting higher, more panicked. By the time I finished, I was almost hyperventilating. Okay, my mom said, and I could hear her taking a breath. Okay, first thing, you need a lawyer. A real estate lawyer, not Google, not your realtor, a lawyer. I don't know any real estate lawyers. Then you call the bar association, you get referrals. And you don't talk to anyone else about this until you've talked to a lawyer. Not your realtor, not this woman, nobody. Do you understand? Okay, I whispered. And Ashley, don't assume the worst yet. You have documentation. You went through proper channels. You have protections. Let's see what the lawyer says. But after we hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had already shifted. The apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a place where something bad was about to happen. I went to the window and looked out at Mount Hood, barely visible in the November dusk, and I wondered how quickly a dream could evaporate. I found a real estate attorney the next morning. Her name was Margaret Chen, and her office was in a glass building downtown. The kind that makes you feel even more anxious because everything looks so professional and expensive. I sat in her waiting room for 15 minutes, staring at a painting that was probably meant to be calming, but just looked like a blur of blue and gray to me. Margaret herself was younger than I expected, maybe late 40s, with sharp eyes and the kind of efficient energy that made me feel like my problem was at least being taken seriously. She sat across from me at a polished desk and listened while I explained everything. The phone call from Patricia, Karen Mitchell's claim, the apartment I'd closed on just days ago. "Do you have all your closing documents?" Margaret asked, pulling out a legal pad. "Yes, everything. The deed, the title transfer, the inspection report, the promissory note." "Bring them tomorrow," she said. "I'm going to need to review everything carefully. But I want you to understand something right now, Ashley. In Oregon, once a closing happens and you receive a deed, the property transfers to you. Full stop. Whatever claim this woman has, and I'm not saying she has a valid one, it doesn't automatically invalidate your purchase." "So I'm okay?" I heard the hope in my own voice and hated how desperate it sounded. "I'm saying you have protections," Margaret said carefully. "But we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Who is this Karen Mitchell? How is she related to the previous owner? What documentation does she claim to have? Until I see what she's got, I can't tell you whether this is a legitimate concern or a bluff." I spent that afternoon gathering documents. I had them in a folder on my laptop, in my email, in the folder of papers from the title company. I printed everything out and organized it chronologically. It was methodical work, and it calmed me a little. At least I could do something. At least I wasn't completely helpless. That evening, I called Jennifer. I hadn't told her about any of this yet, and I needed to hear a friendly voice. "Hey," she answered on the second ring, sounding cheerful. "I was just thinking about you. How's the new place?" I almost lied. I almost said it was great. Everything was fine. I was just calling to chat. But I didn't have the energy for it. "Something's wrong," I said. Jennifer's cheerfulness evaporated. "What? What happened?" I told her everything. By the time I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Wait, so someone's claiming they own the apartment? Like, for real?" "Apparently. Her name is Karen Mitchell. She says it belonged to her brother." "But you have a deed." "I know." "So how can she—" "I don't know," I said, and my voice cracked. "That's what I don't know. The lawyer said I have protections, but I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I'm going to lose everything." "You're not going to lose everything," Jennifer said, but she didn't sound entirely convinced. "You have a lawyer. You have documentation. This is probably just some crazy person making trouble." "Maybe," I said. "Ashley, listen to me. Don't spiral. Wait for the lawyer to look at everything. Then you'll know what's actually happening instead of just catastrophizing." She was right. I knew she was right. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed in the apartment that might not be mine, and stared at the ceiling and listened to the sounds of the city outside. Cars on the street, a siren somewhere in the distance, footsteps in the hallway of the building. At 3 a.m, I got up and pulled up the title company's website. I looked at the deed transfer again, the document that Linda the notary had said made it official. My signature was right there. The legal description of the property. The date of the transfer. November 9th, 4 days ago. 4 days. Had Karen Mitchell already known it was being sold? Had she let it happen and then changed her mind? Or was she telling the truth? Had the apartment been listed without authorization? The thought made me feel sick. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I didn't have a good excuse. I wasn't actually sick. But my boss, Derek, not my ex-husband, a different Derek, just said, "Feel better soon," without asking questions. I appreciate that about him. I went to Margaret's office at 9 o'clock with a folder full of documents. This time, Margaret took the time to actually look at them. She read through the deed, the title transfer, the inspection report. She asked me questions about the purchase process. Who had showed me the apartment? Patricia. Who had the listing been through? A real estate company called Portland Properties Group. Had I done a title search? Yes, the title company had done one, and they'd found no liens or claims against the property. And Patricia didn't mention any problems? Margaret asked. No. She seemed surprised when Karen called, or at least that's what she said. Margaret made a note. Okay, here's what I need to do. I need to contact the title company directly and find out if they're aware of Karen Mitchell's claim. I need to pull the official records from the county assessor's office. And I need to figure out who this Karen Mitchell is and what relationship she actually has to the previous owner. How long will that take? I asked. A few days, a week maybe. In the meantime, I'm going to advise you to avoid any contact with Karen Mitchell or her representatives. If she reaches out to you directly, you don't respond. You refer her to me. Understood? I nodded. Also, Margaret said, I'm going to send a letter to the title company and to Patricia, formally notifying them of the dispute and requesting that they maintain the status quo. That might light a fire under someone's ass. I almost smiled at that. Margaret seemed like the kind of lawyer who didn't waste time on pleasantries. I went back to work the next day, trying to act normal. I attended meetings. I worked on a campaign for a new client. I sent emails. But I was operating on maybe 30% of my mental capacity. The other 70% was in a loop, running through worst-case scenarios. What if Karen Mitchell was telling the truth? What if there had been some kind of fraud in the sale? What if I lost the apartment and the money? What if I had to start over? By Friday, I was exhausted. I'd barely eaten all week. I'd called Margaret twice asking if she had any updates, and both times she'd told me she was still working on it. I went home and sat on my apartment's hardwood floor. My apartment, I kept reminding myself, and I cried. Not pretty crying, ugly, gasping, can't breathe crying. The kind where you don't know if you're crying about the apartment or about being 34 years old and alone and watching everything you'd worked for turn to dust in real time. I was still sitting there when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me pick up. Is this Ashley Patterson? A woman's voice. Professional, but with an edge to it. Yes? This is Karen Mitchell. I understand you're claiming ownership of my brother's apartment. My heart stopped. This was exactly what Margaret had told me not to do, engage with Karen directly. But I was caught off guard, and before I could think, I said, Your brother listed the apartment for sale. I purchased it through a realtor. I have a deed. A deed that's fraudulent, Karen said. My brother didn't authorize that sale. He's not in a position to authorize anything right now. What do you mean he's not in a position? I asked. There was a pause. That's none of your business. What is my business is that you're living in a property that doesn't belong to you. I have a lawyer, I said. You should contact her. I gave her Margaret's information and hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. I called Margaret immediately. She called me directly, I said when Margaret answered. Karen Mitchell. She said her brother didn't authorize the sale and that he's not in a position to authorize anything. What does that mean? Margaret asked. I don't know. I asked, but she wouldn't say. There was a pause. Okay, that's actually interesting. That might mean something. Let me make some calls. Margaret called me back 2 hours later. Ashley, I need you to sit down for this. I was already sitting, but I sat up straighter anyway. Okay. I pulled the county records. The apartment was owned by David Mitchell. I also pulled some public records, did a basic background check. David Mitchell is 68 years old. As of 3 months ago, he was admitted to a memory care facility in Salem. He has advanced Alzheimer's disease. The world tilted a little. Oh. Karen Mitchell is his sister. She's listed as his power of attorney and healthcare proxy. which means she has legal authority to make decisions on his behalf. But property sales are generally not included in that authority, unless the power of attorney document specifically says so. So, what does that mean? I asked. It means Karen might actually have a legitimate claim here. If David didn't have the capacity to authorize the sale, if he was already showing significant cognitive decline when the apartment was listed, then the sale might be voidable. The question is, when was the apartment listed? And what was David's condition at that time? I felt my stomach drop. How do I find that out? I'm going to subpoena the real estate listing information. I'm going to get David's medical records if I can. This is going to take some time, but we need to know the timeline. After I hung up, I sat in the dark living room of my apartment and tried to process what I'd just learned. David Mitchell had Alzheimer's. He'd been in the care facility for 3 months. The apartment had been listed when? I tried to remember what Patricia had said. She'd shown it to me maybe 2 months ago, but it had been on the market before that. Was it possible that the apartment had been listed when David was already showing signs of dementia? Was it possible that he hadn't actually been capable of consenting to the sale? The thought made me feel sick in a different way. I wasn't angry at David Mitchell. I was angry at whoever had listed the apartment without making sure he actually had the capacity to authorize it. I was angry at Patricia for not flagging this. I was angry at the title company for not catching it. And somewhere underneath all that anger, I was terrified that Karen Mitchell was right. I didn't sleep that night either. At some point around 4 a.m, I pulled up the county records myself and found the listing information. The apartment had been listed on August 15th. David Mitchell had been admitted to the memory care facility on August 9th. 6 days. The apartment had been listed 6 days after David was admitted to a facility for people with advanced Alzheimer's disease. I called Margaret at 7 a.m. I knew it was early, but I didn't care. The apartment was listed 6 days after he was admitted, I told her, to a memory care facility. Margaret, did I buy a stolen apartment? Don't use that word, Margaret said, and she sounded more serious than she had before. Let me look into this, but Ashley, I need to prepare you for the possibility that this might not go the way you want it to. After we hung up, I sat on my bed and realized I was shaking, not from cold, from the slow, creeping realization that I might actually lose this. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I'd been naive, because I'd trusted the system, because I'd assumed that closing on a property meant something. And now I had to wait while lawyers figured out if my dream had been built on someone else's tragedy. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal documents, phone calls, and sleepless nights. Margaret worked methodically, pulling medical records, depositions, and title transfers. She subpoenaed Patricia's emails. She filed a motion to preserve the status quo, which meant I got to keep living in the apartment while the case unfolded. But it felt like living in a borrowed space. Every morning I woke up wondering if today was the day I'd lose it all. David Mitchell's medical records were damning. His diagnosis had been confirmed in July. By August, his cognitive decline was documented as severe. His neurologist had written in notes from early August that David was no longer capable of managing his own affairs and recommended immediate guardianship proceedings. The apartment had been listed on August 15th, 6 days after that assessment. Someone knew, Margaret told me when she called with the update. Someone knew David couldn't consent to a sale and did it anyway. The question is who? I thought about Patricia, professional Patricia with her sensible blazer and her steady voice on that first phone call. Had she known? Or had she been lied to? Margaret requested Patricia's deposition for early December. I didn't attend, Margaret advised against it, but she gave me a transcript the day after. I read it in my apartment, sitting on the floor with cold coffee beside me. Patricia had been blindsided. That much was clear. She'd received the listing from a real estate agent named Tom Brennan, who worked for Portland Properties Group. Tom had told her that David Mitchell wanted to sell quickly and discreetly because he was moving to a care facility and wanted to avoid any complications. Tom had provided her with a power of attorney document that authorized him to list the property on David's behalf. But here was the thing. That power of attorney was dated August 10th, after David had been admitted to the facility, after his neurologist had declared him incapable of managing his affairs. And the signature on it didn't match David's other signatures. It was shaky, barely legible, nothing like the clear, controlled signature on the deed from 5 years earlier. "We need to talk to Tom Brennan," I told Margaret when I called her after reading the transcript. "Already working on it," she said. "He's lawyering up. His attorney has been uncooperative." But Margaret had something Tom Brennan's lawyer hadn't anticipated: a witness. The manager of the memory care facility where David was staying had been contacted by Karen Mitchell several weeks ago, asking about the circumstances of her brother's admission and the state of his mental capacity at that time. The manager, a woman named Linda Chen, different Linda from my closing, but the coincidence of the name struck me, had documented everything carefully. She had notes about David's condition on admission. She had notes about subsequent visits. She was willing to testify that David had been severely cognitively impaired and that she had serious concerns about whether he could have legitimately consented to anything in the days around his admission. "This is going to be your smoking gun," Margaret told me. "When Tom Brennan's lawyer realizes we have a memory care facility manager who can testify to David's incapacity, they're going to want to settle." But I didn't want to settle. I wanted answers. I wanted to know why Tom Brennan had done this. I wanted to know if there was money involved. I wanted to know if my realtor had been complicit or just negligent. "That's not how this works," Margaret said gently. "Settling doesn't mean you lose. It means you both agree on a resolution without going to trial. In your case, a settlement would likely mean either getting full ownership of the apartment free and clear or getting your money back plus damages." "I don't want my money back," I said. "I want the apartment." "I understand, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that you might not get it. If this case goes to trial and we lose, you could lose everything. If we settle smartly, we can guarantee you walk away with something." But Margaret was right about one thing. Once Tom Brennan's lawyer realized what we had, the tone of the negotiations changed. It happened on a Thursday in mid-December. Margaret called me at work. I was actually at the office that day, trying to pretend everything was normal, and told me to find a private place to talk. "Tom Brennan's attorney has reached out," she said. "They want to discuss terms." My heart started hammering. "What kind of terms?" "They're offering to acknowledge that the power of attorney was invalid. They're offering to file paperwork withdrawing the listing and returning the property to David's estate, which means it becomes yours. Completely. No clouds on the title." "But that's—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "That's what you wanted," Margaret said. "That's you winning." "What's the catch?" "They want confidentiality. They don't want this to become public. They want you to sign an NDA that prevents you from discussing the details of the settlement or the circumstances that led to it." I was quiet for a long moment. Why would they want that? Because Tom Brennan is currently under investigation by the Oregon Real Estate Commission. Because Portland Properties Group is probably going to face disciplinary action. Because if this becomes public, it becomes a story. And stories like this are bad for business. "So Tom Brennan gets away with it," I said. "No," Margaret said firmly. "Tom Brennan loses. He loses his credibility, his standing with his brokerage, potentially his license. The Real Estate Commission is going to come down on him hard. And you get the apartment, clean title, full ownership. That's winning, Ashley. That's you winning." I thought about that for a long time. I thought about what I wanted, and I realized that what I wanted, more than anything, was for this to be over. I wanted to stop being afraid. I wanted to stop waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing. I wanted to stop living in my apartment like it was temporary. "Okay," I told Margaret. "Let's settle." The paperwork took 2 weeks. Margaret negotiated the exact wording of the settlement agreement and the NDA. She made sure that Tom Brennan's office was required to pay for all my legal fees, which came to almost $18,000. She made sure the property transfer was processed through the title company quickly and cleanly. And then, on December 28th, I got a call from the title company. They needed me to sign some final documents. I went in the next morning and met with Linda, the same notary from my original closing. I wondered if she felt the weight of that, if she understood what had almost happened. She didn't mention it. She just explained the documents to me as I signed, the same way she'd done before. But when I finished signing, she looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "I'm glad it worked out for you." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. The new deed was recorded on December 30th. I got the notification email from the title company that afternoon. I sat at my desk at work and read it 3 times to make sure it was real. Ashley Patterson, sole owner. No liens, no clouds, no complications. I called Jennifer that evening and told her to come over. I told Marcus too. We ordered pizza and opened a bottle of wine, and I told them everything. The settlement agreement technically prevented me from discussing the specific terms, but I could tell them what had happened, how close I'd come to losing it all, how it had been resolved. "That's insane," Jennifer said, shaking her head. "That guy just tried to commit fraud and he gets away with it?" "He doesn't get away with it," I said. "His career is probably destroyed. The real estate commission is investigating. His brokerage is probably going to drop him." "Still doesn't seem like enough," Marcus said. I nodded. He was right. But it was over. That was what mattered. It was over. I stood at my apartment window that night after they left, looking out at the lights of Portland reflecting off the Willamette River. Mount Hood was invisible in the darkness, but I knew it was there. I knew it would be there in the morning when I woke up. This apartment was mine. Completely, legally, unambiguously mine. No one could take it. No one could claim it. No one could tell me it was never supposed to be mine. I'd learned something important through all of this. Sometimes the victory isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's just the quiet relief of knowing that you get to keep what you fought for. Sometimes it's just being able to stand in your own living room and finally feel safe. 3 months later, I hosted that Thanksgiving dinner I'd promised. Jennifer and Marcus came. My mom came, driving up from Eugene with 2 pies she'd made. I learned to cook in the months since the settlement. I made a turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing. It wasn't perfect, but it was made with my own hands, in my own kitchen, in my own apartment. We sat around my small dining table, which I'd bought with my own money for my own space, and my mom raised her glass. "To Ashley," she said, "who kept fighting when everything looked impossible." "To Ashley," Jennifer and Marcus echoed. I looked at my mom's face, at my friends' faces, at the food I'd made, at the apartment I'd fought for. And I realized that the apartment had never really been about the apartment. It had been about proving something to myself, that I could work for what I wanted, that I could fight for it when someone tried to take it, that I could survive being wrong about how the world worked and still come out okay on the other side. The truth is, I'll always be a little angry about what Tom Brennan did. I'll always think it's unfair that he probably learned his lesson but didn't face criminal charges. I'll always wonder if Patricia knew more than she admitted. But I also know that anger doesn't change anything. What changes things is showing up, doing the work, getting a good lawyer, not giving up when everything looks dark. I own my apartment. I earned it. And no one, not Karen Mitchell, not Tom Brennan, not anyone, can ever tell me that it's not rightfully mine.